All right, thank you everyone for attending today. Just wanted to do a quick introduction. We're HITRUST 360. We provide cybersecurity consultancy for companies all around the country. One of our top rated teams is our HITRUST team, and we have a member of that team today here, which is Gary. And we'll be covering some great HITRUST content for you all and showing you how HITRUST can help you get into the healthcare industry. So before we get started, just want to do a quick introduction. So we have Ryan McGowan. He is our head of revenue here at HITRUST 360. Ryan has helped many different companies use cybersecurity as a tool to grow their business. And he will be teaching you guys on how HITRUST in particular can help you grow your revenue with your business. Also, we have Gary, as I mentioned earlier. Gary is our HITRUST expert here at HITRUST 360, and he'll be walking you through the process to actually becoming HITRUST certified. So with that being said, I just want to go ahead and hand it over to Ryan McGowan.
Thank you, Corey. So yeah, like Corey had mentioned, my experience has very much been on the business side with HITRUST in terms of supporting organizations in making the business case justification to pursue it. So, I'm going to speak to a little bit what I've learned over the course of, I guess it's 15 years now since HITRUST was born, speaking with various different business leaders about the business benefits they've reaped as a result of them investing in HITRUST. So from there, as Corey mentioned, I'll then turn it over to Gary. Gary's got the practical experience. He's a certified assessor in his own right, has actually had his feet in the street, if you will, working with different teams in their pursuit of HITRUST certification. So he's going to give more of the operator experience and what that pursuit to achieving HITRUST certification looks like from that angle, rather. So moving right along. I don't know if Corey, do I have control here, Corey?
Yeah, you have control. Let me skip the slide for you.
Yes, please. It doesn't look like it's working. So yeah, I guess first just a little background on HITRUST, history lesson, if you will. So HITRUST was born in 2007, and one of the challenges at that point in time was, first of all, there was a convergence of cloud adoption, if you will. So lots of organizations were looking to outside third parties to support with the delivery of key technologies. And as a result, that then inherently drove up a lot of interest and demand in vendor management. And this is even more so notable in the healthcare space specifically. But one of the challenges in healthcare at the time, well, it remains the case, if you will, but HIPAA itself is not certifiable, right? HIPAA is law, and there was no third-party attestation of compliance that service providers could pursue that was uniform, meaning across all different vendors. So as a result, HITRUST saw this as a gap, and it rightfully was. And as a result, they collaborated with a number of different healthcare providers, insurance and payers, technology providers to form, the HITRUST Alliance is what it was known as. And that HITRUST Alliance, among other things, what they brought to market was a comprehensive, prescriptive, and certifiable form of compliance demonstration with the intent that healthcare organizations could accept this as a form of security assurance ultimately, and that's what HITRUST has done quite successfully since 2007. Next slide, please, Corey. So these are the four, primary benefits, if you will, that I'm going to speak to. Obviously, revenue growth, the ability to ease the sales cycle, some of the benefits that we're seeing across the market, not just explicitly or specifically rather, or exclusively in healthcare, and then a little bit of some of the complementary benefits as well for pursuing HITRUST. Oh, okay, Corey, I'm sorry. There we go. Grow revenue. So this is definitely the most prominent. in terms of business drivers that we're seeing today and have since really inception. That is, the business problem is organizations got, growth targets, and they may be very well be aggressive growth targets. As a result, they need to enter into new markets. And as a result, they generally being high growth technology companies, B2B SaaS service provider organizations, they decide they want to compete on security and compliance, and they want to have this support them as a differentiator. So as a result, organizations oftentimes playing offense, meaning being the first in their niche, want to pursue HITRUST certification so that they can benefit on entering into that green field as a certified HITRUST service provider, and by extension then being able to compete more favorably than their competitors by their security and compliance story. So this is one that we're seeing. This is probably 80% of the business drivers that we see for HITRUST are attached to revenue goals. Next slide, please. So this is something that is more and more, again, because of the prominence of looking outside the firm to have critical technologies delivered to you as an entity. Vendor management is oftentimes something that is disrupting the organization, if you will. So a very common scenario would be you've got end of quarter coming up, your sales team's focused on closing deals and forecasting deals and getting them tucked into the end of the quarter. And it's notable that we're at the end of the quarter right now. But oftentimes in the 11th hour, what hangs up deals is vendor management, and that is your prospect, soon to be customer, as they're checking the boxes in advance of procurement. They want to have assurance that they're not introducing security vulnerabilities into their environment by leveraging your software, your tool platform. And as a result, then that disrupts the business, because oftentimes that assurance is asked for in the form of a questionnaire. The questionnaire is not something you want your sales team to complete. As a result, you start taxing your engineers and other business leaders to support with the completion of a questionnaire. So one of the things and one of the benefits we are seeing in the space is we're seeing that HITRUST is kind of stopping that or easing that burden. It's turning the conversation from reactive, that is responding to customer inquiries, to proactive, and that's leading with the HITRUST certification and using that as a way to ease those same concerns. Next slide. So one of the things that we're seeing, because HITRUST is, the keyword there was comprehensive, because it is as comprehensive as it is, and because vendor management has we'll just call them default checklists, if you will. So it's not uncommon for us to work with vendor or customers, prospects that request, either SOC 2, for example, or ISO. Well, what we're seeing now more and more, and I suspect that trend will only accelerate, is that HITRUST is making its way onto those same vendor management checklists, because the industry is coming around on understanding that HITRUST is more comprehensive than SOC 2 or ISO. And provided that environmentally, that is the control environment, is the same as what you may bring through a SOC 2 or an ISO, HITRUST, it's the high bar. So that's an ancillary benefit that I think organizations are probably learning. It isn't necessarily the business driver that supports their business case justification, but it is an ancillary benefit that they're beginning to see. And then next slide, please, Corey. So minimally, because HITRUST is as comprehensive as it is, minimally investing in HITRUST, some of the, or one of the benefits to that investment is, if you are electing to, in the future, pursue additional compliance frameworks, that HITRUST investment will inherently get you closer to having the controls that would be required to achieve ISO or achieve SOC 2 or achieve PCI. Again, assuming that those control environments where your PHI data and the other environments that you may be considering bringing through, provided they're the same, there is benefits to be reaped across other frameworks. And then I vision cast a little bit and speak in theory a little bit as well. But if you are pursuing HITRUST certification, there is a practical application where you could have multiple audits conducted concurrently with the HITRUST assessment, and call it a single set of field work with multiple unique frameworks, assurance of compliance with multiple frameworks. So that one, it does have a few dependencies. Notably, your HITRUST assessor would need to be an ISO certification body or have a CPA concern to issue SOC 2, or if perhaps you were looking to bolt PCI on concurrently with HITRUST. Obviously, they'd need to be a QSA and qualified to do so, but that is, in theory, something that an organization pursuing HITRUST could benefit from as well. And I believe with that, Corey, I'll turn it over to Gary, and hopefully that he has a better job controlling the mouse than I did. Gary, I think you're live, sir.
We'll see if IT operations background will help. Yep. Okay, so thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the background on HITRUST. So I want to talk a little bit about, well, of course, the key activities to complete, but I'd like to think of this about as, okay, how does an organization get into HITRUST, or what does it take to get started, to get into it, and then what are we going to get out of it? So I don't want to make this a this versus that, but as of the beginning of this past year, there are now two types of pathways to a HITRUST certification. One is the 2-year assessment. It's called the R2, or the risk-based 2-year. The other is the 1-year assessment, or the implemented 1 year. So real quickly, in the R2, or the risk-based 2-year, we typically cover 3 control maturity levels, and that's policy, process, and implementation. There's 2 others, they're optional. This varies somewhere between 198 and 2,000 requirements. An average threshold is about 350. For most of our customers, we're seeing around that 360, 350 number. It's a very customized approach, and this, of course, requires an external assessor to review the evidence, and then HITRUST also does a QA assessment on that. The I1, or implemented 1-year assessment, considers a fixed control number for implementation only. However, it will say, it doesn't ignore policy, but it will say, okay, we're going to measure your implementation against your policy. So now you have to have a policy to look at to gauge that implementation level. It says approximately, currently there are exactly 219 HITRUST CSF requirements. It focuses on leading practices. It's what we call not just table stakes, but a moderate level of assurance. Requires an assessor, examination of evidence, and then QA is completed by HITRUST. So unlike like a SOC or maybe a PCI, our firm looks at your evidence. Our firm also has QA on that assessment, and then HITRUST, a third party, performs QA on it as well. So it's kind of doubled up on the number of eyeballs that are looking at it. Now, the first thing we're going to do in order to get into the process is the assessment scoping. That's more relevant in the risk-based 2-year than the I1, because the I1 is a fixed 219, but you'll need an external assessor who can guide you through the process of the scoping, and that's going to determine the granularity of what you're going to be assessed on, and it's going to affect the number of controls. Your first time through, you might want to just do the basics, and then your next time through, you might want to do some of the specific HITRUST controls. It just depends on what your goals are. This exercise, after this, we're typically going to do a gap assessment where we'll run through the different controls that were presented, and we'll give you a gap assessment report on that, so you'll know what to work on in order to pass the certification. That's going to give you time to do the remediation where you're working based off of those gaps. And then following that, there's a cool off period where for at least 90 days to ensure that a newly implemented control is baked in and operating over that amount of time. We can't just write a policy the day before we're going to do the assessment and say, hey, here's our policy. It's got to be in place for a while, as well as your cybersecurity controls. Then we'll do the validated assessment testing. On this, we're going to look for the level of compliance with the applicable requirements. The requirements will be scored commensurate with a formal scoring rubric. If you're not into the math, we'll take care of that for you, and their online tool will also help take care of that. So then we talked about how to get into it. Now, what are we going to get out of it? The R2 validated assessment report gives you, assuming you complete that and have an acceptable number of maybe corrective action plans, you'll get the 2 letters of HITRUST certification. One has the scope, one does not include the scope. Secondly, there'll be a validated assessment report, and the R2 certification is valid for a period of 2 years, assuming satisfactory interim assessment is completed the following year. That interim assessment will come back and remeasure one item from each of the 19 domains, plus any of the corrective action plans that came up during the process from the previous year. This risk-based 2-year assessment certification can also provide a NIST CSF report. That's the cybersecurity framework. So that provides a scorecard against the NIST. So you kind of get 2 items there. Whereas with the I1 validated assessment reporting, you get the certification letters from HITRUST, you get the validated assessment report, you get a 1-year certification. And then so the following year, you could do the I1 again, or you could jump up to the R2. One thing to note on the I1, there is no NIST CSF report that comes along with that. All right, what are the next steps? Of course, you want to engage with your HITRUST Alliance team. They're going to give you their pricing. That's not something we deal with, but they'll tell you kind of what you can expect pricing wise. You can prepare your team. Hopefully you have a good team that's done some assessments, some producing evidence for audits before, and then engage with a trusted external assessor. This is where Risk 360 can come in, and we can help you with that. We've gone to the top of the mountain a few times, and we can help you along that process.
All right, so thank you very much, Gary. Thank you very much, Ryan. We're at a point where we can start taking questions. We actually have 4 questions that have come in so far, and anyone on the call, if you have questions, please reach out. And I guess this is more of you both can answer, or one of you can take the lead on these. So the first question is, if I get an I1, can it reduce the time it takes to get a SOC 2 report?
The question was, if you get an I1, is that a good time to do a SOC 2?
Yeah, will it reduce the amount of time it takes to get a SOC 2?
Right. The I1 is going to be a comprehensive list of security controls, and that can feed the controls list that you're choosing for the SOC 2. It would streamline your process. If you're doing a HITRUST, especially an I1 or an R2, you're going to be answering all these questions to begin with. The answers can then be used to fill out your SOC 2 report.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, I think our strategy is, you should, if you're going to pursue HITRUST with us, and it's your first year or first compliance investment, we should just attach SOC 2 to it, because or rather your entity that's pursuing it, the lift is marginal. A lot of the lift would be on the assessor side, if you will, in terms of issuing 2 discrete deliverables, but it too is marginal, and it makes sense to do them concurrently. So that's oftentimes what our recommendation is if you're going to go into HITRUST, let's just bolt SOC 2 on top.
Okay. So our next question, I think it's more towards what Ryan, what you covered. So what are the other drivers outside of growth that a company should pursue HITRUST?
Well, I mean, I guess the one that's obvious and goes without saying is security, right? I mean, it's a security framework ultimately, so the business benefits tremendously. It's a high bar, as I mentioned, so you're talking about a larger number of more prescriptive controls that you're deploying across your organization. So I think certainly security and elevating the security hygiene of the firm is significant.
Along with that, it probably shows, I guess, a level of seriousness or maturity. One of the reasons HITRUST is a well-respected certification is that it's hard, and there's a level of effort and expense and capital and people to put into that to get out of it. So it shows a seriousness to the security standpoint.
Okay. And our next question is, why would a company do I-1 over getting an R2?
So an I-1 is a good way to get into the HITRUST pool and learn a little bit about the tool. To be honest, one of the main things you do in the certified CSF practitioner is learn how to use their portal. You get to practice that, use that, documenting your implementation. You can kind of get familiar with the process that HITRUST will use, as well as working with the assessor, knowing, kind of getting started with providing the evidence that would be required to do a full assessment. And then you could move your way into the R2, where you're measuring it against your policy process as well as the implementation of those controls. It's a good place to start if your funding partner or customer hasn't specifically mandated the R2. It's probably a good place to start, and then you can at least tell them, hey, here's where we're starting with HITRUST. So we know we want to do this, and we're getting started here.
But Gary, is it fair to say, like, we haven't really seen the market establish a position on I-1 versus R2 in terms of like what vendors are accepting or not, at least?
No, and I think it's because it's still so new. It was announced late last year, and then the question was, wow, what's it going to be? And they kind of told us a little bit about the framework of it, but not the actual what. And then they released it right at the end of last year to be ready and fully baked for starting January 1. The market just hasn't spoken on that yet, but typically the market respects the HITRUST logo.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have one more question. Will this session be replayed? And also, do you guys have any more information or content on HITRUST? So the first question is yes.
Yeah, absolutely. This will be recorded and distributed across YouTube at a minimum. You can find it through our website. And then what was the second part of that question, Corey?
Do we have any more content on HITRUST?
Absolutely. Check out our website. We've got white papers and blogs across HITRUST, as well as just about any other security or compliance framework that you may be considering. Also check out our YouTube channel. We have more HITRUST content there as well.
Okay, and one final question: if they want to work with Risk 360 on HITRUST, how can they get involved with this?
Well, they can reach out to Ross. His email is right there. They can reach out to myself on LinkedIn or guess my email is the same nomenclature as Ross's. So we'd be happy to visit with you. Or you can hit the contact us to our website as well. So there's no limit in the ways we'd be eager to pick up the phone or answer your email.
All right, cool. Well, that's it for questions.
Contact me on
Anything
LinkedIn as well.
Okay. Well, that's it for question, guys. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Gary, for all the great content you presented today. And we look forward for everyone to get more HITRUST content coming from you guys soon. Thank you.